All right, let me just wait for a second to make sure that it's streaming and that we don't have any reverberation from this load. Okay, perfect. All right, I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. We'll both keep an eye on the chat. If you are in the ASC webinar group, I think we've got some people slowly coming in. And hey, Heidi. And then whoever's watching live, welcome, you guys. We are doing our fourth installment of our webinar series, which we do every month, just trying to bring you some wisdom, conversation around some of the things that we all collectively as adults are trying to do to improve our lives and live more productively, live more playfully, and all of that stuff. And for the month of December, we have been exploring this concept of data. So today's webinar is focused on tracking progress to optimize your life. This concept of data has kind of arisen in just conversations that we have with people in the ASC, which is kind of the source of our curriculum. We look at what people need and figure out how to give little tips and tricks to thriving in those areas, because we always have new opportunities that can arise, and we want to just be able to talk about the things that are relevant rather than just creating crazy curriculum. And this is our fourth month, so we talked about what did we talk about in all the previous ones? I'm already blanking, but we did 2020 planning in October. We did just kind of preparing for the holidays. What did we talk about? Yes, it was like gratitude, so many wonderful, wonderful things. I'm like, why am I blanking on our September topic? September was
that was with
vitality and energy.
Vitality, yep.
Yes. So, all right. So we're on number 4. We're gonna kind of cut right to it, just because we want to make sure that this hour is powerful and helpful. And if you are watching this on YouTube, hello. Feel free to type in the chat. And if you are in our ASC group and watching live from there, you can feel free to drop some comments or questions or other takeaways or other words of wisdom that we can share with our community. So first things first, one of the things that Gary and I wanted to talk about when it comes to data, and Gary, I know that I've just been like rambling. Do you have any thoughts on some of the backstory of like why data became super relevant for us to have this as a theme today?
Well, for me personally, I look at when, as a business owner, as a solopreneur, as a dad, as a human, we get into our groove. We start doing our thing and it becomes autopilot. And that's great. Because it helps us be focused, but it's important to analyze things and see where we are. As someone that is more on the creative side, and I came from a world of data when I was in marketing, I sometimes get averse to data, but I do know it's important, especially if you want to achieve those big goals that I know that you have. So when Apryl sprung the topic of data, I was like, let's do it. I'm all in.
Yeah,
we got some awesome stuff that is just going to just help, whether you've heard it before or this is the first time. I invite you to just listen with an open ear, because this might be something that is the exact thing that you need to hear right now that is going to help you jump into 2020 ready to rock and roll.
Absolutely. And I will also preface this by saying that some of my thoughts around data, and I'm somebody who's very data driven, and I love that. But I think also in the last 5 years, I think that and this will kind of, transition into our first discussion, is this idea that, data can be super powerful, and it can also at sometimes like be destructive. Like everything's in moderation, right? Like, some of the things that I think about when I think about data are people who do these research studies and they say, 70% of people, choose this. these are the trends of what people see. But I also want to preface with the idea that data can be a very powerful tool, but it also shouldn't be something that hampers you from making a choice that might be against what data says, because we all have our own data points, and this is going to be a huge part of this conversation. And, leveraging studies and that type of data can be helpful, but it's not by any means the standard, right? And so people might say that there's tendencies, and there's like a curve, and that's the curve that they're summarizing. But sometimes we can be those outliers outside of the curve. I think Sean Achor in his TED Talk, he talks about how he was studying all the people who were on the outside. And so knowing that this data conversation really, really takes importance on creating your own data and using that data to fuel your own personal growth. Okay. So we'll talk about some of the generalizations that are made, but also figuring out how to use your own data to help you accomplish what you want to do. And so I'm super excited about this topic.
Yes.
All right, so the first topic, or the first talking point that we wanted to talk about, is when data is beneficial to collect when making progress on goals. So we're going to talk about when it's beneficial and when it's not beneficial. So Gary, do you want me to just kind of start on this? I know that
jump in, and I'm gonna bounce off of that.
So the first thing that I want to talk about is the reason that we need data in the first place is kind of goes back to the fundamentals of why why we would be even creating this data in the first place. And the reason, and for the basis of everything that we do, is to create more self-awareness, right? When we want to create change, we have to be aware of what needs to be changed before we can actually go ahead and make that change. So the whole purpose of collecting data from the very get-go, the whole underlying reason, is so that we can obtain more self-awareness around the things that we do, and then make other informed decisions as we progress. So as I was mentioning a while ago, data can be super, super helpful, but it can also create more angst, anxiousness, anxiety around, having to conform to something. So you want to make sure that when you are choosing data that you are going to track in order to improve your life, you want to make sure that you're not just trying to collect data on everything. You want to be a little bit more conscious about the data that you're collecting. So, because too much data, you can be collecting data and it could be completely useless or not something that will benefit you in that space. So try to stay away from this idea of like tracking data on everything, because if you can't really act on it, and I think that this is also the piece when people are starting to do surveys, you want to ask questions that you can actually respond to. If you're trying to collect data for something in your business or something like that, if you're asking a question and creating some data points to get self-awareness around what's out there, if you're not ready to act on it yet, then it might be a detriment, or it might also set expectations for other people to say like, oh, they're trying to do something, and then it will almost allow some that expectation of having to act on the data. Now there might be times when people have data that they want to collect and they need year over year, and they might need to take a viewpoint from a larger timeline, and that makes sense. But I think you just have to be very mindful about the data that you collect, because you don't want to create more overwhelm for yourself. This is the thing that we are actively trying to avoid. So trying to be very, very focused, very, very intentional about the data that you're collecting. So let's see. I think that was all I wanted to say about that. Gary, you want to jump in?
So the first thing, it reminds me of, this quote by Robin Sharma, is what gets measured gets improved. And I remember when I forgot, it was about maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, and I wanted to lose a few pounds. And so I stepped on the scale, and then I saw that number, and I'm pretty sure that some of you have had this experience where you're like, oh my gosh, wow, this is going to be a long journey. And to April's point about the overwhelm, you're like, wow, okay, okay. And a mentor of mine said, Gary, it's just feedback. We are, like we're taking this and have an emotional reaction to it. And is that emotional reaction helping you? By you not wanting to look at the scale, is that going to help you on your journey? And I said, no. And for me, that reframe of this is just feedback. It's just a number. It means nothing. I am putting this emotional baggage on it, but it's still important to measure, because how am I going to know if I'm, making that progress? And so that is, to April's point about being intentional. And then, since we're on this sort of health kick, and I'm curious about, what are your thoughts around data, and what are the things that you're looking to measure? So going back to the point about, health is, are you measuring the right things? Because the scale is just one metric. And for me, I went away from the scale because it just wasn't, it wasn't serving me. There's a lot of baggage, and I started measuring my sort of levels of energy. And then I started also measuring like different circumferences and stuff like that. I had like a professional said, you know what, Gary, this is what you should measure, and these are the frequencies that you should measure. And that helped me stay consistent. So that's just my 2 cents on that. And Heidi was talking about how Heidi loves Robin. That's awesome that you got to see him live. Yeah. A lot of data there. And Heidi divorced to scale as well. So that's our first point. Curious about what your thoughts are.
I thought of something else to kind of mention on the data stuff. I think data can be super powerful. I keep on saying this, but I think that there's also validity and value in understanding the feeling. And that's another data point that you could track. But I think that the reason that you'd want to track data is to observe trends, right? So if you are just trying to say, I just want to have a good day today, and it could be as easy in a given day to say, like, what would make today really great is if I go to bed at 10 o'clock, or if I, and using these like simple data points to just track. And I think people think a lot about data being numbers, that we have to keep track of something, but it doesn't always have to be that way. And we're going to talk about that in the future points as different metrics that you can look at. But I want people to understand that, when you understand the why behind collecting data, it will help you structure the kind of data that you're tracking for yourself. So, I mean, sometimes, especially too, if you are looking at something where it's very granular and there's just, it's one day in and out, what is going to be success today, being able to make that mark and being able to like cross something off the list or click that checkbox, those can be data points. But if you don't need to reference historical data, you can also think about different ways to avoid tracking data and saying, ultimately, how is it that I want to feel, and allowing yourself that process of reflection in lieu of grabbing some data. And so when we start to talk about the next 2 talking points, you'll start to see when it's important to keep data and when it's not. And again, if you guys have any questions about certain things that you're tracking, or certain things that you're trying to decide, especially with 2020 coming up, right? This is our last webinar of 2019. Is there a behavior that you want to see come out differently, or a behavior that you want to change, or just even a process that you want to change? How could we either leverage data to watch your progress, or is there an alternative way that would be a little less overwhelming? So, all right, shall we go into tip number 2 or
number 2?
Why don't you start this one, Gary?
Yes. All right, cool. So, like I said before, with my journey of being healthy and reclaiming, that vitality, jumping on the scale was something that was triggering. It wasn't productive. Every time I saw the number, it's interesting. I didn't feel motivated to keep going. It was like, it makes no sense whatsoever, but our emotions are wonky like that. And our next point is identifying metrics that are important to monitor for your personal growth. And that's in the line of like health, relationships, career, etc. And it's my main point here is, what is going to be the thing that is going to keep you moving? And it could be something, for me on my health journey, it was measuring. I had a little journal at the end of the day is I kept track of, did I work out? Check. How do I feel? Like a little emoji, like smiley face, frowny face, so I can start to see trends over time and understand situations that were, where I would see negative trends that I was like, oh, look at this, didn't work out, didn't feel as great. Okay, interesting. And so this is the question, wanted to push it back over to all of you is, what is, what is that metric that makes sense for you, and how can you keep track of that? And so Apryl, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think, the important thing when it comes to identifying these metrics, and we're talking about, there's data in the business world, which we're not necessarily talking about today, but this is more about your own personal growth. I think that the areas where we tend to track data most could show up in health, right? Because I think a lot of people have a target of like, I want to lose X number of pounds,
Yes.
something very tangible. So you have to understand what that tangible thing is that you want to track. You can also track stuff in your relationships. You can track stuff in your career. You can track all of these different things, all those areas of life. But I think you have to start, if we kind of rewind back through some of the conversations that we've had in the last few months about planning for 2020, it is, what is it that you want, right? And so as an example, one of the things that I decided that I wanted to track next year, because I have a lot of curiosity around it, is tracking different health metrics. I don't really have a goal to lose weight or gain weight, or for the first time, right? I'm happy with my weight. I have some of these stories that maybe I'm addicted to sugar. I love sugar so much and I don't really want to change, but I also am almost, in the past few years, I've purposefully not been tracking the data because A, I wasn't willing to make the change, or B, I just don't know where that's going. But I also know that I'm turning 40 and I can only, as I get older, it's going to be a little bit harder to maintain my health, or I'm going to have to put a little bit more work into it. But if I can be a little bit proactive, I want to see how my moods and the things that I'm doing are impacting based on what I'm eating, how I'm working out, and all of these things. Because I just don't know. I have a general feeling, but I don't know. So that is a trend that I want to track moving forward. I can also say, and this might be like a little TMI for people, but one of the things that I did track over the last couple of years in my relationships is this idea of being intimate. One of the, I think that there was this part of me that was like, okay, maybe I should be more intimate with my husband more often, but I just want to get a sense of like what the status quo is, and then we tried to make a goal to do it a couple times. And with kids, it's like, things change. And so I started tracking that data, and it was helpful in a sense of like trying to motivate me to be like, okay, we just got to get one more in for the month. But then I think I also noticed that it started to become something that was overwhelming, because if we weren't hitting our targets on a regular basis, then it was the signal of something more that we needed to discuss. And so, there's what's great about choosing something to be very mindful about is, again, it's creating that self-awareness, but understanding like, what is it supposed to help you, meet a specific goal that is quantifiable, or, what is that going to tell you? And when the data isn't, working in your favor, then there's probably something that's like deeper rooted. Or if you're killing it on your data, you're meeting your targets, then how does that allow you to potentially push yourself to the next level, in your health or your career or whatever that is? I think in the career space, I think a lot of people will use money as a data tracking point. And that could be, as well as, people want to make a certain amount, and how would you create those certain metrics of how that money comes in, and is there a steadiness to it, or is there, figuring out the trends of when, specifically there are opportunities where, money might come in and then it might go quiet. You might want to look at trends that way to say, when are the best times to promote my work or promote my business, etc. So, what else can we talk about in this? I think that there's the set of metrics where if people want to just be able to track habits, that's another place where people, say data. It's like, did I complete it or did I not complete it? I personally have a daily habit checklist, that has all the things that I should be doing. I don't always get 100%, or I barely get 100%, but I know that if I were to complete all of them, and still be able to do more than just the daily habit, that's a very successful day for me. And I can see that, on this list, there is a, set number of things. And the more that I do, I can feel the impact on my own personal happiness, because it's like, I feel like I've accomplished something for the day, or that I'm up to date. And that seems to be when there's the least amount of overwhelm. So those are, different habits that you want to actually track, but there are also things that you need to commit to if you're going to create them, because then I think that there's something very mental about like checking a box, right, Gary? That feeling of accomplishment actually helps you. So the more that you have check marks unboxed, or boxes unchecked, it could potentially lead to more distancing and less completion.
Yeah, I agree. And to add on that, and this is something that is scary, that a number of people, don't want to dive into this just because of identity and sort of self-worth, is productivity. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure we all would love to get an extra 2 or 3 hours of our day back. And we talked a little bit about this in our webinar about, some of the habits of highly successful people. Mm-hmm. One thing that I would love to invite you all to do is, especially if you want to be more productive, is you should be doing, this is not something that you should do all the time, but maybe once a quarter, do an audit of what you actually do. You can be as strenuous as, track every hour, and you have like a little notepad and you write down what you did. Or it can be, an approximation, like maybe a few times a day. But getting that data is probably going to be surprising. And I was actually talking to a coaching client about this, where they just always felt so busy. And, they like, well, I know I'm doing stuff, but what happens is in your brain is when you're doing this, especially if you're, prone to, working with other people and get pulled off into other areas, at the end of the day, you're like, wow, that was a busy day. But did you do anything? And did you do anything to move the needle in your business or whatnot? And when they did that, they didn't realize the little things that add up over the course of a day. And it sometimes is uncomfortable and hard to look at, but you just have to do it once. And then you can look at it and say, what isn't serving me? And when we get into the next section, we can talk about like different ways of tracking stuff like this, but you will be surprised. They tell you to do this with your, if you're trying to work on nutrition, of like, what are you putting in your mouth? And having to like be accountable for that will make you decide, do I want to write this down?
Yeah.
And so, anywho, that's just something, something to consider. And over in the comments, Heidi was talking about how she was just posting about this. So I'm glad that it's very relevant. And you don't have to be, or you have to be intentional, or else it probably is not going to happen. Yeah. And Heidi is a champion of the Pomodoro. I'm all about that as well, of intentional work blocks. So anyways, moving on.
And I also want to say, so some of the things that we do in the ASC include some of the Pomodoro technique, right, to be able to stay focused. But as Gary was mentioning, this whole idea of regularly reviewing your data, right? You don't just collect data and then just forget about it, right? You want to be able to set some time to review. So if you're going to be tracking anything, just as much as the creating the self-awareness, your ability to go back to your plan or go back to your data and review it so that you can make tweaks is the whole point of doing data in the first place. And so in the ASC, what we do is we have the option, depending on the range of reflecting that people want to do. I think most people, we try to encourage a monthly review of some sort. And so we have these actually specific forms that people can fill out, and that is collecting data on their behalf. And when they fill out these forms on a monthly basis, the beauty of it is that we can actually do a review of the entire year and say, look at, how you tend to be more productive in January, February, you kind of drop off March, May, and then there's another jump in May, to kind of see where you were with the things that you were working on and how that can inform you. I know that over the past 5 years, I have been realizing more and more that when I'm on travel, I don't tend to do things. I don't tend to accomplish things. So I've stopped this feeling of saying, hey, I'm gonna do some work while I'm on the plane. It almost never happens. And so I can stop, saying that, and then I don't go into this place of feeling guilty because I said I was going to do all this stuff and I didn't. I just know that my productivity levels when I'm traveling or when my kids are home tend to be lower. So I don't try to do stuff as much during that point. Like, if anything that I can do is a bonus. This whole concept of me having a summer sabbatical, I'm working, but it's a different vibe. And this is because I've been tracking that data and realizing, like, yep, I said I was going to do this thing and I didn't. So you want to get in that habit of reviewing your progress on a regular basis. It could be as small as daily or hourly. It can be as much as quarterly. At the very bare minimum, we say do that annual plan because it can set you up for so much success. And you have some sort of benchmark. Even the beauty of looking back at your annual plan from year to year is like, that's so interesting that I said I wanted to do those things, and look at how things have shifted. And it gives you that awareness of how much you've grown. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention on this point too is that you can use satisfaction ratings as a data point as well. I did this with the Wheel of Life, where I look at all the different areas, on that tool that we created. There's all this opportunity to say, here's how I feel on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied I am. Not necessarily how good I am, but how satisfied I am. Because if you're focusing on personal growth to be more happy and all of those things, that satisfaction rating, even though it's a feeling, it's a way that you can quantify those feelings and then have some trends to look at over year. So I think that we've exhausted that second topic. Yes. Right?
Moving
on. Number 3. So we wanted to actually talk about specific tools that have been useful maybe with us. And I know for those of you that are on and that are leaving comments, tools that have been super helpful. I know that Heidi, she's been using the productivity planner recently. And then there was another journal that I think that you're using, Heidi, that you can share again with us in the comments. But there are a bunch of different tools and different ways that they can be used to help you reflect on your personal data, right? We're talking about your own personal data here, so that, yes, you can take other outside data, but the truest form of data that can be the most impactful for you is your own data. So should we just go down the list?
Let's roll.
So the very, very first tool that you can use is a journal. And it can be as simple as a notebook. or it can be as advanced as a specific planner. Do you use it? What do you use, Gary?
Right now, I am playing around with bullet journaling. I don't know if you
Mm.
are familiar with that. I've used the Passion Planner at one point. Love that. It was a little bit limiting based on some of the things I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I am thinking about trying the High Performance Planner by Brendan Bouchard in
Ooh,
2020.
I want to check that out.
A friend of mine gifted me that, so I haven't used it yet. So excited about that. What about you, Apryl?
So it's very interesting. I'm just wanting to write this down for myself. So what's interesting about journals is that I have, sometimes I will go through, a notebook where I will just jot notes. But I notice that I never ever really reference those notes. One thing that has been a staple of mine for the year is I would get just like a really fat planner from Target. So this was like I don't know if I can get the light to shine. Oh, it just has plans on the front, but it basically has daily and monthly, to the minute. Oh gosh, I don't know if I can get this, where I would list out what I would do every day. Let me see if I can. So it goes from like 6 a.m. and this is like in February when I was like really religious with it. Where it was more of a let's just track what I'm actually doing and using this as a checklist. So it's like a modified form of data, but it is data because you can kind of see like where am I, doing well. There are certain things I think if I didn't end up doing them, I would cross them off, or if they weren't completed, there wasn't a check mark, and I could see the trends on a daily basis of like the times of the day when things were just breaking or things that were happening where I wasn't creating enough space. So it gave me a visual cue of looking at my day. What I'm going to do in 2020 is actually consolidate everything to an online calendar. And I've been doing that for the last few months. And people might not look at this as data, as a, like a planner or a to-do list app, but I think that it can give you a lot of awareness, especially depending on the type that you choose. Some of the journals that I've used in the past that have been really, really beneficial for me is the self journal. I can try to pull a copy of that really quick. Hold on. This is probably very similar to the Passion Planner, or not the Passion Planner, but the Productivity Planner. This looks very much like a planner in the sense, but it also has different. It has more qualitative data that you can track. So it gives you like lessons learned and the wins for the day, and then gratitude. So gratitude journals can also be a way that you can look at data, because when you're doing something on a daily basis, it's fun to kind of look back. I'm doing a gratitude journal with my younger son lately, and I did. He had a gratitude journal, but he finished it. And so I just took the adult version of the 5-minute journal, and we're both filling it out, and he's filling out like one and I'm filling out two. But I was using that gratitude journal prior to doing the self journal for maybe a few months. And so I have stuff from 2017 in this journal where I'm like, ooh, what was I working on? And it's kind of a great way to take a look at how much the things that I'm grateful for now have shifted between now and 2 years ago. So journals are really, really great. I think that any sort of journal that, even if you're just writing, if it's completely blank or it's a bullet journal, you can track your tasks, you can track just even how you're feeling in these types of tools. So that's really good. Let's talk about apps. The beauty of apps can be a sense where you can actually track some data that could be relevant to you. So one of the things that I want to start with is Gary is like such a great he's a great meditator. You still use Headspace daily, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So here's a good example of like data that was like very motivating. Like when you are in an app and you see other people's data, it's very motivating. But like I think I was decided that I wanted to meditate, and I did this whole thing where I wanted to do it for maybe like 30 days straight, and I'm not great at meditating. But I would see Gary's data and it would be like his streak is like 387 days, and I'm like, man, And it was also a great way for him to see, like, if I was doing it, I was like, for these 30 days, I really want to. But then you saw me like drop off because I was like, I can't keep up. Or like when I would lose 441 days, like that's crazy to me. But it's also a very motivating thing because it's like, I'm sure that you're like, oh, I don't want to mess up my streak, you know?
I don't want to mess up the streak.
Yeah, and which is amazing. And there were times when I like dropped the ball and I was like, man. And then when it was like when one day became two, it got really frustrating. So now I'm not doing meditation in Headspace anymore. But my kids are meditating with Headspace.
I didn't mean to like.
No, it wasn't you, but it was just kind of like, oh, I can't keep up. It was motivating for me until I dropped the ball. But I think that there is the other piece of like, okay, maybe meditating daily is not my thing. I don't want to feel guilty. Like you have to pay attention to some of these feelings about how the data like makes you feel, right? Let's see. For ladies that are out there, here's a crazy data point that we could track. I have a data app to track my menstrual cycles. Gary, I know that you're love talking about this right now.
I have a story about that in just a moment.
Okay.
You go first, and then I have a story.
So we're just going to talk about like bodily functions today.
Let's go there.
I have been tracking my cycles for at least 5 years now. On a monthly basis, I just go into this app and I type the date in and then I just leave it so that I know the dates between cycles. This could be very helpful especially for people who are, trying to conceive and all of that. There's a whole bunch of other tools that can help with that too, I guess. But, this is like the very bare bones. So what was interesting was that in 2016, I, was dealing with a lot of stress and I was noticing that my cycles were completely off. They were like 15 days one day. And, for all you men out there, 28 days is like the general cycle, but I'd have 15-day cycles and 28-day cycles and 45-day cycles. And it would just be completely crazy. And I didn't, I did it more just to know, when I thought that maybe I was going to have my cycle. But I started noticing that it became unpredictable. So then I kind of just like dropped the ball on, I was still keeping it, but I was noticing that this was not consistent data. And in 2016, I started seeing an acupuncturist and we were talking, I was going primarily to handle stress issues. And he had asked me like, when's your last menstrual cycle? And I was like, it was this date, but what's interesting is that like I've noticed for the last year and a half that it hasn't been significant. And so I don't know Chinese medicine, and like I was kind of skeptical too when I was trying to start doing acupuncture, but he said, I think that there is a connection between your cycles and your stress. And he was like, I'm going to work on stabilizing your cycles and we'll see how things happen. And I kid you not, like he got me to a 25, 26 day cycle consistently for about the course of that year that I was doing acupuncture, which is super crazy. And so I haven't been doing acupuncture, but what I'm noticing now is that it's starting to vary a little bit more again. And so I'm trying to use that data as maybe this is something that I need to go back, because I felt like I was doing it too, like it became too much, having to go to see somebody and do acupuncture weekly. So I kind of like slowed down, and then my acupuncturist closes practice, and so I was like, okay. So anyways, the whole story of this is that like sometimes this data that you can keep in apps can actually like become very, very helpful in places that you didn't see. So if you are tracking something and it isn't creating too much overwhelm for you to keep track of it, then, it could be something valuable down the road. So, okay, your story, Gary.
And it's on tracking menstrual cycles.
Okay.
Courtney's probably going to.
When was your last menstrual cycle, Gary? No.
So when Courtney and I were dating, before we got, and actually I think, it was while we were dating and through our engagement and stuff like that, I downloaded an app and I was tracking her cycles because I noticed that her moods would change, and I wanted to be aware of that and make sure I can be as supportive as possible. So I was doing this on the sly. She would just like notice, like, oh yeah, period started today. I'm like, cool, period started. And then like I would like use, because the app that I downloaded like can say, what's your mood? And I would just like mark her moods, and it will start to show trends. Being like a data person, I was like, ooh, really interesting. And so I was like, uh-oh, it's coming up again. I need to be extra sensitive, again, trying to be a good boyfriend and stuff like that.
Aww.
And I eventually told her, and she thought it was hilarious that I was tracking her menstrual cycles on the fly. And then she would ask me, because her cycles were a little bit irregular. She's like, hey, when should my next one be? And I would be like her consultant on her period. And then I had so much data that when we were actually trying to conceive, like I just exported it and gave it to her so she can import it into the app so she can keep track of it for her own thing. So yes.
That's amazing. That's amazing. The beauty of apps. So yeah, tracking mood is a really great metric to track too. You never know. You can kind of see how things are happening. I'd be curious to see how my moods go like between the week. There's so much that I'd be so curious about. Yes. And one of the other things that I wanted to mention in apps is that data point that at least on the iPhones, I don't know if Androids do this, but like they tell you how much screen time you've been on your phone or you've been on your computer and all that stuff. It's not necessarily, I mean, it's something that's just already collecting for you, but it's also a good awareness. This is the first time that I saw that notification. They were like, your usage this week was 8 hours and 44 minutes. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. But I also then realized that I do a lot of work on my phone, and I'm always on the go when it comes to, just juggling a whole bunch of things. And so that was a good point. And it only went down when I started using my computer more to do work. So
being intentional about it. My usage on my phone tends to be high because I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and it is like my primary source of audio in the car. But I've been looking at it particularly around social media use, in that regard.
Oh yeah, because it also tells you specifically what apps. Mine will tell you that I play a lot of solitaire.
It's all good.
In the morning and at night. Okay, the next different type of tool is wearable technology. So this is probably not a surprise alongside with the whole apps thing, right? Your phone is like its own kind of wearable technology in itself, but then there's also like, Fitbits and watches that can track things like sleep, number of steps. That's always like a great way for people who say like, I want to be more active. Just getting an awareness of how many steps you're taking throughout the day. What else? What other wearable technology is there? There's actually one that I tried recently was, it was like I think it was called Calm or something like that, or Breathe, or I don't know what it was called, but it was a little thing that you wore on your belt, or you could wear it like on your bra strap or whatever if you're a girl, and it would actually track your breathing and notice like if your breathing was becoming shorter or longer, or if you needed to meditate. So it would either like send you a notification on your phone to say, you seem tense. Why don't you take a breath for, a couple minutes, which is interesting. And I think that like Apple watches do that now. They say it's time for you to breathe, or it's time for you to stand up. So that's kind of a great way to kind of disrupt whatever you're doing in your daily, to give you that awareness of like, hey, have you taken a breath lately? And just having it on you as something that is, a part of your body, and have those reminders throughout the day, which is super fun. What else? We've got to-do list apps. We talked about a whole bunch of ways that you can use that to track data, data completion. I use an app that is available on my phone and on my computer called Things. It's a to-do list app. And I just basically keep all my data of my long laundry list of things to do, and the smaller that list is, the better. Or and I can set things on a daily basis, which is great. People might use Asana or Trello, different other ways to track progress of completion on certain things. Do you have anything else on that note,
Uh,
Gary?
no, I'm curious. What do other people use? I When I was hardcore into productivity, and it's interesting because that's how I met our mutual friend Mike Vardy. I was using like the the really expensive to do apps, and with everything, like at the time, because I was managing a team and I had a whole bunch of things that I needed to keep track of, it
Mm-hmm.
made sense. And then after a while, because it became habit, I was using it because it was my sort of normal thing, and it was the equivalent of having a Ferrari, but driving it just around the neighborhood. Like you're not getting the best use for that tool,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to like come to terms with that.
Can
And
you tell me what tool that was that you were using?
OmniFocus,
Omni.
uh, and I had it. So I again, this is really going to be dating myself. I had it when it was just on the Mac before smartphones were a thing, and then it became a smartphone app, and then I got it on my iPhone, then I got it on my tablet, so I had it on everything, and I had all these processes and stuff, and it was one of those things where it made sense, and it was expensive. It's an expensive app to buy, but I was using it until it didn't make any sense.
Yeah. So what do you use now?
Right now, I just use the simple bullet journal, and I use so I have an app that people are going to love and hate at the same time.
Okay.
And this app is just called Do. It's a very simple app that has two functions. One, it's a whole bunch of timers, so you can set timers, like I have all these sort of timers, like um, when I was doing planks and trivia and like all these things. It's really cool.
Oh yeah.
Everything from steeping tea to um, pomodoros on there, and parking expiration. But the power of this is just if you want to remember to do something, and it's a very simple app. You put what you need to do, and when you need the reminder, and it will buzz you every minute
Mm.
until you mark it done. And it's annoying. It's so annoying. But and if you just get the normal version, not the free version, you can't snooze it. So you either need to mark it complete or change the time. And so it was a
Yeah.
great reminder for me
Yeah.
get something done. So
I think
especially,
that Yeah, I think that in conjunction with, if your goal is to be more efficient, um, I think is probably a good way to see how long it takes you to do something. And if you have to snooze, then it's not like, that's not an appropriate
mm-mm.
time that you would take, because I'm thinking, yeah, steeping tea, like they tell you it's 3 minutes, but like, what's the time that I need to drive from one place to the other, and did I complete that? I mean, one, it can also just give you, time limits. I think that
Mm-hmm.
this could probably be a different webinar, but almost talking about how like time limitation and setting deadlines can really just like enhance your productivity in a sense. And so if productivity is a metric that you want to track, I mean, understanding how long it takes you to complete certain things can be a game changer on your productivity. Because,
Yep.
I think that back in the day when I used to just set meetings and it was like it was on my calendar, I would forget about like the time it would take for me to get from point A to point B. And I was trying to like schedule things. I'm like, oh, okay, just 10 minutes it'll take me, but it took me more than that to walk from my car and all of that. And it gave me this awareness of like, okay, if I'm going to have a meeting outside, I need to give myself, I don't want to feel like I'm rushing or that I'm running late. And so I need to create that buffer time. But you don't necessarily know what that buffer time is until you're actually creating data around, all right, I'm going to start the timer. How long does it take for me to drive from home to the city or whatnot? That can be a huge game changer for your own productivity. So,
And
um,
for me, I primarily use that. Like I use the timers a lot, but like if I'm going to put something in Do, is just for stuff like, oh, check into flight. I put it for the time, and so it like sort of buzzes me for that. Or I do a weekly football pool, and I have to have my picks in by a certain time. And so like I have like it's a repeating thing, and it's actually going to go off in like 2 hours. And it's just a reminder: get your picks in, and it will keep buzzing me until I mark it complete. Or
every minute?
I have the paid version. Every minute it will like, get your picks in, and so like I said, it can be very annoying, but it's that sort of nagging thing to like get it done. So it is one of those things where if like you need to get something done and you need that reminder, it's a great reminder to do it, but just know that it only has one function, is to keep reminding you. And so it's a little bit more powerful than the standard reminder app that comes default with the iPhone. So
there's a question on, so what's the difference between the free version and the paid version? It's the ability to snooze?
You can snooze. I think you can add more timers on there. I was fortunate. Again, this is an app that I've had for years, and I got it, I think, when it first came out. So I upgraded to the paid version for like 99 cents, just to be able to snooze. But the snooze options, like you can snooze for like 10 minutes, 1 hour, X, Y, and Z. And so
the snooze can be like dangerous.
It can be
like,
but and it defeats sometimes the purpose of the app. So if anyone's interested in that app, I just highly recommend getting the free version. You shouldn't need to pay for it. I just paid for it just because it was like a no-brainer, because it was like 99 cents. I'm like, all right, dope. I'm down with that.
How wonderful when things are so inexpensive. And then, in terms of other tools, some of them we mentioned in the prior talking points, is just, especially things that we've embedded into the process for the ASC to just try to make it easy for people. And then also having like somebody on the other side who's, sometimes here's a really important point. You can create data, but like if you're not showing the data to anyone, accountability becomes a very big thing where, if nobody is really like holding you accountable to it and you can't do that yourself, it is very easy to be like, okay, I'm ingesting like I'm putting 5 teaspoons of sugar into my tea, but nobody else knows. But to have to either write it down or have it be in a place where it kind of gets mirrored back to you and you have to actually think about it a little bit more, it can be super, super powerful. So some of the tools that can help you with making this progress, even though they're not necessarily like data tracking in a sense, is the accountability forms that we were talking about that we created for the ASC specifically. Just even having an accountability partner, right? Somebody who's going to sit here and ask you the question, so what did you accomplish today? Or asking you, did you complete that task? And having that external like data tracker for you can be a super great tool to help you with actual data that you want to track. So if somebody were to say to me, somebody who is in the ASC saying, like, okay, my goal is to, complete this project and, it'll, or this online course, and it'll tell me what percentage. You can very easily have somebody on the outside, like just checking in with you every once in a while and being like, what's your percentage? What's your percentage? And that way, it kind of removes the data tracking on your part. So if you had an accountability partner or, you're part of the ASC where we're trying to help, create more data for you to be able to track your own progress and help you do that reflection, because sometimes that's the easiest thing that we tend to forget when we're making progress. I see a lot of people sometimes say, I know that I've been doing stuff, but I don't really feel like I've accomplished anything. Like, let's put some metrics in place so that you can actually see your progress, so that you can actually feel good about it, because you should feel good about accomplishing things. So that's all stuff that we tend to try to help people. And this has been a very great theme for the month, especially for me and Gary, to say what types of data have we set up to help people in the community, and what more can we do? Because that data can be powerful. Now, we don't want to create data that's not going to be useful, but also where are those places that we can create a little bit more structure so that it makes it easier for people to track what they want to in order to see their own personal progress. And, you know, the bare bones piece of it is, you know, starting with that annual plan. Like that's the smallest level of commitment that you could do for yourself, and just have that annual review of how you've done, and then another plan for the next year. We also talked about, you know, calendars and setting things up like weekly meetings where you can track data and have that checkpoint. And even just a spreadsheet, like an Excel spreadsheet or a Google spreadsheet, you can track so much data. It's just a matter of really understanding, is that data something that's going to be helpful for you, or are you just creating another file that is going to just be in the mess of what you've got? So anything else? And then maybe we can just kind of recap the high points, just if people are like, okay, what, we just had this conversation here. What are the big takeaways? And if you're watching this, definitely share your takeaways in the comments. Anything that you want to really take into account moving forward with data, because it can be super powerful. It just needs to be leveraged in a way that is efficient and effective.
Yeah. So one thing that I want to point out that you are probably all picking up on, but I just want to make sure that I get this point clear, is there is a method behind a lot of this madness. And if you know me, whether personally or just through the ASC, I talk about, you know, the power of play. And one of the cool things about having this system and looking at data, and we sort of hit on this, but we didn't explicitly say this, is that some of these are game mechanics, in that these are designed to get you hooked. And when they're done properly, you can get a 400 and something day streak in meditation. And what it does is that your brain receives dopamine for doing things, and the dopamine is a reinforcement to keep doing it. And so for me, I don't want to break that streak, because I'm like, man, I finally got the year streak. So I got the reward for that, and I'm like, yay. But then it's like, all right, you know, got to keep it going. Now, there is some upside and there's some downside about, you know, game mechanics. Is the upside is that it can get you started, it can create a habit, it can create that momentum that you need to keep going. But sometimes the downside is some of the things that we talked about, is that when you do break a streak, sometimes you feel like you don't feel encouraged to even do it again. And there's a quick story that I'll mention, where they did a study with pianists, especially pianists that when they were young, so kids that play the piano when they were young. And so they loved it. They got into it, and what sometimes happen is you get put into competitions because your parents or your mentors and stuff like that say, "Oh, you're really good at this," and so they found that when you replace intrinsic motivation, so your just desire to play the piano, with extrinsic rewards, you have to keep the extrinsic rewards up, because the moment you take it away, you lose your intrinsic motivation. So in this study, they were looking at these prodigy piano players that ended up going to competitions, and they got awards and stuff like that. And what happens the moment that got taken away, and this is the same for gymnasts and stuff like that, the moment they stopped doing competitive, they lost their drive to even do it, because that an extrinsic reward took over the intrinsic motivation. So you just have to be mindful of that. And so that's something that I ask myself and remind myself. It goes back to what Heidi said about the intention, is reminding myself, why am I meditating? What is the benefit of the meditation? And then using that streak as a motivator to keep me going. But I just wanted to put that out there so that you are aware of, this is just not something that is just sort of haphazard. It actually is a great tool to keep you going.
Yeah. I think that that's a really, really good point. And it's definitely like a hack to help you, create this consistency in whatever it is that you want to do. But if you have those ways of really keeping track of whatever it is that you want to track, I'm going to commit to 90 days of tracking my sleep, my exercise, my meals, just so that I can kind of see get a little bit more awareness about this question of like, do I really ingest a lot of sugar? And do I need to make a change in my health right now? Or what do I need to do differently? And so you can leverage data in so many ways, but just make sure that it's something that you really understand the why behind it. So I would say that that's like the first recap point. Number one, make sure that when you are choosing to track data in any way, that it's serving your greater why. That'll be number one. What could be number two?
Well, just number two is, what are you tracking? And so I think we should go like this. The why is important. And then what are the metrics that you're tracking? And are these metrics going to serve you?
Yeah.
And your progress?
Yeah. When we think of when, I mean, also like, when will you be collecting the data? How often? What's that range of time? And, when are you going to find the time to review the data as a whole? In what interval?
And how you do it is important.
And
whether you use old school analog versions or you have some digital version.
Fancy wearable tech.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that the last thing that I want to also mention is just also understanding that data can be qualitative, but it can also be quantitative, or quantitative, but it can also be qualitative. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a number. It can be a feeling. It can be something in the written form where it can kind of show you that progress, but it might take a little, the data doesn't always have to be numbers. But you can quantify anything that doesn't, that is a little bit more qualitative if you need that sort of focus.
Yep.
So,
and but the last thing I'll mention is who are you measuring this for? Who are you measuring this with?
Yes.
Because as Apryl mentioned, you shouldn't just do it just to do it. And it does help to have company.
Yeah. And it's also, the data is tracking, this is your data, right? This is not just, I'm trying to figure out the trends of other people. Use those studies to supplement your curiosity about your own data, but your data is the most powerful data that you can collect, and it shouldn't be ignored, because that's going to be where you can achieve success in whatever it is that you want to do. So yes. I hope this discussion was helpful. If you're watching this on the replay or you were here live, thank you. Heidi, thank you so much for sticking with us today, and a couple other people who I saw were watching online but not commenting. But thank you guys so much, and then we will see you in the new year with our new topic. And if you're in the ASC, you'll hear about our theme for January tomorrow. And if you are not a member of the ASC, but you're really curious about it, feel free to check out me and Gary's websites are in the comments below. We will be launching the community at large early in the new year, or very, very soon. So we'll give you all the information on that shortly. But thanks, Gary, for hanging out with me. And I will thank all of you for watching. So see you guys in the next installment of the ASC webinars. Bye.
Happy holidays. Bye.
Holidays.